Hey everybody, good morning. It's Andy, obviously, and it's a Saturday morning. I got my coffee, and we got another episode of Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast, and I'm excited. We're continuing to have guests on, and today is going to be really fun. As you can see below, I have my good friend Brian, and it's Riggsbee, right? Brian
Yeah,
Riggsbee.
that's right. That's right.
How you doing, Brian? Thank you so much for joining the cafe, by the way, today. I'm really excited to talk to you. How you doing today on this Saturday?
I'm great. I have a 3-day weekend, and I'm happy to kick it off with this. Actually,
I had a 4 day weekend. I actually had off yesterday, which was well partially off. I had like more of a half day, but I still consider that pretty good.
yeah,
And
that's great.
but yeah, Brian. Obviously the title is the history of Rygar, which I think is really cool because today we're going to focus in on a game that you were very much or seem to be very much attached to, and I think we're going to learn why on this podcast. But before we get into Rygar, before we get into all that, I always kick off with my guests a simple question. What is your connection to video games? Tell us before you tell us what you do for work and all this. We want to hear what's your background, what connected you as a kid to loving video games. Like, let's kick off with that.
Yeah. So let's see. The first system we had at our house was the Atari 2600. So you could probably guess roughly what my age is from that.
I think we're in the
I think it
same
was.
generation then.
We had like a Popeye game. I remember. Really boring, really terrible. I think we had maybe one other game, but I can't remember. We had a local arcade, so we are really lucky to have that. So I had a lot of arcade game experience.
And this is
With
Northern California you grew up? Is that right?
yeah. So I grew up in the East Bay, the east part of the Bay Area in California. Still in the Bay Area now, and yeah. So we had that 2600. But really, my gaming journey took off with the NES, which is true with probably a lot of people listening. And my first experience with that was my neighbor. I was maybe 6 years old at the time. My neighbor said, "We have this new thing. It's called Nintendo, and we have this game, and there's a dragon in it." And that's all I needed to hear. And from there forward, I'm just talking about Bowser and Super Mario Brothers. Not everyone thinks of him as a dragon. He is, I guess. And
I guess that's
it
true.
just
No one
took
ever
over from
really thinks
there.
about Bowser. He's a dragon, right? Or is he a big turtle? I don't know. I'm
I
confused.
think he's probably more of a turtle, but for 6 years old, I think it's a pretty apt description, and he gets a pass on that. But yeah, that's how I got hooked in. From there it was everything thereafter. 16-bit consoles. Played Game Boy and all that. PC games later in life, as many of us have, and but yeah, really the NES is what stuck with me, and that's what I have my biggest collection in as well. And I still play NES games from time to time, in particular those ones that I just didn't have or never ran into when I was younger.
What are you like are you a casual collector today? Do you still like kind of like buy retro games, or do you it sounds like
Yeah,
you have somewhat of a collection, right?
I do. It's buried in like a quarter of a closet, so it's not very beautiful. Maybe one day I'll have the space to put it on display, but yeah, I still have some of those older games. I kept all my N64 games and NES games and stuff like that. But like a lot of us, I've gone back and recollected some of them and tried to curate it to be my most favorite ones. A few complete in box stuff, of course. Some random things where like you know I'm not going to play that Japanese version of the game necessarily, but the cover art is so much better. I feel like I just need to have it on my shelf.
Nice. That's really cool. So, and then Brian, what's your connection? Because I know that you were in development or programming. Did you work in gaming before you got to where you are today, which we'll get into as well? What's your background in the industry? You have a connection there, right?
Yeah, so I started, let's see, it was 2003, so a long time ago. I started just as a QA tester. I worked at a third party company who was building games for EA. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but a lot of these companies, they will, outsource a company, a developer to build the game, and then EA essentially acts as the publisher at that point. And so we were making the first game I worked on was a Medal of Honor game, which was actually a lot of fun. As a tester, where you had no experience and low responsibilities, you basically would be assigned a level, and you would run through it every day, and then we would play multiplayer for the rest of the day. And to be paid to do that, like, actually kind of fits the cliche you see in those cheesy old commercials about what game development is. It actually kind of was that, but the rest of my career was not quite as glamorous. Like, there was more responsibility and games that were not as exciting. I think I peaked at the beginning in terms of the types of games I played on, because we worked on multiple Medal of Honor games. We did Pacific Assault was one of them. Breakthrough was the expansion, the first one we worked on. We even worked on a MMORPG, very unknown game called Action Empires. Our company actually purchased it from these indie developers. At the time, I mean, this is 2003, mind you. Our company, it was TKO Software in Santa Cruz, now defunct. We wanted to really go into the mobile space and be on every platform possible. And mobile games at the time were literally flip phones. So everyone at the company, I remember, cringed when our CEO said, mobile is the future. Games are going to be all over these things. We're going to make this Gauntlet game, this Tenchu game. We're going to make this X-Men game. The X-Men game was a fighting game where literally all you hit was, right, or the 6 button on the flip phone to move to the right. And moving right also was attack. So you can imagine how terrible the user experience was with that. But you know what? He was right as far as mobile was going to be the future, not the end all be all, but it ended up really blossoming with smartphones. He was on to something then, but he didn't get to see it through because that company unfortunately went under. Following that, I ran some QA teams, worked on a couple MMOs, Gods and Heroes, and Star Trek Online. Some people might know Star Trek Online. So just like ran a team of like 20 testers there. But it wasn't until the company after that, it was Page 44, where I was a producer. And producers are kind of like project managers, kind of like program managers, depending on what industry you're comparing them to. And that's more of where my career ended up heading. And we worked on a lot of Disney games, so not the most fun games for an adult when you're dealing with Hannah Montana and High School Musical, and we all would just cringe about how, the nightmares we'd have of like these songs stuck in our head. Some of the games are like rhythm and dance games, so you would just have to hear these songs over and over again. And I actually, at one point at this company, I switched into a design role because I was just feeling more like design was like my path at the time. And so I worked on, these Disney games, and we even did like a Madden football game on the iPhone, but again, very primitive at the time. And I was a game designer for quite a while actually at this company, and got a lot of experience in that area. I ended up even moonlighting as a level designer for an indie developed iPhone game called Infected Wars. Not very popular, but it was a fun zombie game. That's when your cell phone.
Is that about a pandemic taking over and turning people into zombies? Because it sounds like it.
It definitely is. It was 2013, so it did.
Way ahead of your time. Way ahead of your time.
Yeah, so I mean that was fun to be a designer in that, but I pivoted out of the gaming industry. I was feeling a little burned out on the hours, the pay, the culture. Not everything wasn't terrible, but those things kind of add up on you, and especially if you're not necessarily working on the games that you're most passionate about. And I figured, I could still build games in some way or contribute to the community in some way, and I did. And so I actually, while I was working at other companies, going down this program management path, which is where I am today, I would just spend nights and weekends building Counter-Strike levels and maps, and I made a bunch of those. And you put them out for free, and you just get the enjoyment of people using them. It's not about like making money on them. It's just about like adding to the community and seeing like, oh wow, that many people downloaded it, that many people are playing it. That's like so exciting. And the last level I made was for Left 4 Dead 2. So I made a 5-level campaign. And at the time, I was making it for Left 4 Dead 1, and I'm sure a lot of listeners know that Left 4 Dead 2 is this notorious story about how it came out too quickly, and people were protesting and saying they weren't going to buy it, but everyone bought it because it's such a great game. And so I had to quickly convert it for Left 4 Dead 2, which was not too hard, but I remember getting some criticism of, this feels like a Left 4 Dead 1 campaign. It's like, yes, it kind of does because one person made it and it takes an insane amount of hours to make that. Like you're building the levels, the lighting, you're putting all the soundscapes in, you're creating scripts for the events. You're testing it yourself. There's a lot of work, but that's I think the gaming thing I'm actually most proud of is that Left 4 Dead one because something like 2 million people have downloaded it. Again, it's free, so of course you're going to get more downloads, but I am proud of that, and I still see people playing it today, even though it's something like 7 years old, which is really fun to see. But yeah, I mean that's kind of the end of my gaming journey until the book. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. Wow, you have a really great, and I love Left 4 Dead 2. And good morning, Biff, and thank you, Brennan, for the follow. Really appreciate it. What was the level called? Genza wants
Oh
to try
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so it's called Tour of Terror, which if you were to Google that, you're either going to get the Disney ride, which keeps me connected to Disney, I guess, or you're gonna get my campaign. It is in the Steam Workshop. It took me a little while to get it up there. There used to be a restriction on file size, and I had to host it on
Is
third-party
this it
sites.
right
But
here? Tour?
yeah, and
No
yeah, and
way.
actually, Fun Tie-In, the artist who did that poster image, he ended up making two posters for it, but he made this widescreen one. This is the second one, and he's the same artist who did the cover for the Rygar book. His name's Matt Waggle. He's a personal friend of mine, and he's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably a good segue. And by the way, awesome that you did some Left 4 Dead 2 stuff. That I mean, that is like a great game in my opinion. But let's get into this. So you wrote a book about Rygar, and before we get completely into the book, what is Rygar? Just for the layman's out there, Brian, what is Rygar, the game?
Yeah, so I mean, what you're seeing here on the screen is this is the arcade version. It looks like, and that's where it all started. I believe it was '86 in Japan, and Rygar is your classic hero. He's actually resurrected. He's brought back to save the world. And there you have your preamble there. And he
He
has
was
the disc.
resurrected without a shirt, right? Just like
That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, it does look. I mean, there is lava underneath you, so it does look like it's pretty hot where he's at. So
Oh,
it's
that's
probably
true.
appropriate.
That's true. That's true. Fair enough. Fair enough. Sorry, didn't mean to
But
cut.
yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, he's your classic male machismo hero, 80s dude, influenced probably by a lot of 80s guys at the time, and his weapon, which is really I think what defines the character more than the character itself, is the disc armor, and it's a really fascinating piece of design, right? It is, it's called an armor. I don't think it protects him at all, but it is that spinning spiked ball. People call it the crazy yo-yo, and similar names. And it's really fun. Like you're shooting that thing out there. It can go up, it can go across, it can arc. Um, Rygar can jump on enemies to stun them. If he gets a power up, he can hurt them. But this original game is just your classic. Keep moving right, keep hitting the enemies. Don't let the time run out. Don't get touched. One hit will kill you. Try to get those power ups, but if you die, you're going to lose them all. So be careful and rack up as many points as you can. This is at a time when showing off how many points you can get is one of the biggest objectives. It's not just about beating the game, but yeah, he's trying to kill the evil Lygar and return peace to the land.
And people are riding rhinos. And it was, it's a very fast paced game. And I guess before we get into why you wrote the book, is there any particular person that is attached to the game, like the creator of the game? Who was the genius behind this, and how did that even start? Like who was like, I'm gonna make this game about the shield wielding guy Rygar, or like where did it all start for this game? Like how did it even become a game?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? Because so this was, I believe it was like the second or third game, I think third game that Tecmo produced. So they had Mighty Bombjack, and they had Pallades as well, and around that time they had what was the other one? They had one other one at the time too, but this was like a totally new entry for them. This is a very different take on everything else they had worked on. What's interesting is, if you look back at a lot of Japanese games from the 80s, it's actually really hard to find some of the credits for some of these people, especially like when you look at like the NES games and things like that. The ports not as hard to find, but um, the composer is very easy to locate, but a lot of the developers are rather obscure. So really, when you look at a lot of the history of like who was behind this game, it's really just, unfortunately, it's kind of just presented in the generic of like it's a Tecmo game. Isn't that good enough for you? It's like, well, I actually personally for this second edition I'm working on right now, I would love to get in contact with some of these original developers. But that is a I've been hitting a lot of dead ends, and I'm not giving up yet. I found a lot of leads, but I'm really hoping I can get in contact with some of these original developers. But yeah, I mean that's a hard one to chase down. I mean, some of the obvious influence you can interpret from this is, this is the 80s. You have like this fantasy land. Clearly, there was an influence to them for like fantasy movies and books at the time, character wise as well, right? You had certain characters at the time, especially in like America and American cinema. Your Arnold Schwarzenegger types, where there's like very muscular, very heroic, doing everything on their own. Clearly, some inspiration was going on there as well. And also in the book, I talked a bit about some other areas from other cultures that might have influenced it. For example, there's a movie called The Flying Guillotine. One of the rabbit holes that I went down when I was researching this, where there is this character. He's this old blind man.
Is this it?
I think this is it.
Okay.
So this might be it. No, this is something else. This might be showing off something about it. But in The Flying Guillotine, you'll see it. Oh, wait, yeah, that's it. There's the disc.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, see the disc.
Oh, yeah.
So you see the disc. It's attached to a chain. It has spikes around it. And in some other images, you'll see it's. I think this is just someone demonstrating the tool. But you'll see in the movie, like it is a red and gray disc. Like it even matches the color scheme. And he is hurling this thing at people. And oh yeah, that's it.
Master of the Flying Guillotine.
Yeah. But like, I mean, the color scheme, the projectile.
It's got that yo-yo like thing going on.
So it makes you wonder if this was an influence or not. Could very well be.
Interesting. So you're saying that Rygar kind of has kind of like not a very like on the nose past, meaning like you can't really put your finger on like where it all started. And I think, and be honest with you, Brian, like when I do these shows, I do a lot of research and like I like to watch like YouTube videos about the history. And when I was watching like the history of Rygar video, I wasn't getting a lot of that like back end history that you're trying to talk about, where you're like finding like what are the cues that made someone really want to make this game. And I find that fascinating. Biff says, great movie. I went on a huge kung fu binge and that was a favorite of mine. Oh, nice. So you actually saw this. Cool. So I guess what about this game, Brian? Because obviously me as a kid, I have a lot of memories of playing a little bit in the arcade, but I think that the NES version of Rygar was the one that hit home for me. And I remember still like vividly just sitting in my basement, and me and my brother had a basement with like, our parents would like one of those like unfinished basements. I'm from the Northeast, very like old school 80s, like the basement wasn't finished. We'd have like a carpet on the hard like concrete floor, and there'd be like a TV, and me and my brother would be like down there playing video games, hours and hours of just watching this side scroller and playing it, man. And I will even say that the Lynx version was a version that I played very much as well, which I thought was a great version of this when it came out on the Lynx. But what made you want to write a book? And tell us a little bit about that process, how you even started to think about that.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So Rygar for the NES was one of my favorite games. It was in the top 10 for sure. I think like most people, the NES one stands out. And the Lynx one, like you mentioned, felt like probably at least at the time, when most of the conversions came out, it was the closest version at the time to the arcade. Whereas the NES was this, light Metroidvania, and I'll get into that more later if you like. But for me, the reason why I selected it is it's like, yeah, I'm one of those people where I love Zelda, I love Metroid, I love all those classics, Mario, etc. But I wanted to write about something that did not have that spotlight. It didn't have that platform because, everyone's already written about those games and they're great games and they deserve all the praise they get. But I wanted to preserve a piece of history. I wanted first and foremost to be historical and have as much information and data and content in it as I possibly could and almost act like I'm preserving a piece of history. And so I selected it because it is kind of niche. I knew it wouldn't necessarily have as much reach as something like Zelda, but that was okay with me. Going back to what I was saying about like those levels I made for Counter Strike and stuff, it's like it's more about like contributing something to the community, touching something, expanding on something that you love and giving back a little bit there and just like giving it the platform it deserves and celebrating it. And so that's mostly why I selected it. It's like top 10, but like let's do something that hasn't been done before. And so as far as the process goes, I kind of roughed it out. I said, at first I thought I was going to talk about pretty much the NES game. Everything else was going to be a footnote. But then I quickly realized there's so much more to be said about the other versions. I played the arcade game growing up and the NES game, but I didn't have experience with the other earlier games. When the PS2 game came out, I played that in real time. But a lot of those other ports, like Commodore, Amstrad, those kind of things, like I didn't have those systems. I wasn't able to play them. So I kept going down more and more rabbit holes. I said, you know what, why not include fan art? Let's celebrate this more. There's fan art from over 30 artists in the book. The second edition that I'm slowly chipping at already has art from about 40 people now. I figure, there's so much more to be said about these other versions of the game. Then I got deeper and deeper and realized there's all these reviews from the era. Like, what were people actually saying about these games in like 1987? It's just really interesting because you think about these games in the context of their time, and you're not looking back on them the way we do today. You're looking at them compared to everything that exists at the time. And so I just kept going down rabbit holes, and I just kept adding more and more information. And yeah, the second edition is going to have even more in it. I'm really happy the first one sold out as quickly as it did. It was a limited run, but still a pretty sizable one, and people really gravitated to it. It actually made me really happy, to know that there was so many people that were so excited about something that I thought was kind of obscure, but actually I'm realizing is not as obscure as I originally thought.
Yeah. So can you buy the book? And thank you for sending me a copy, by the way. I
Oh,
love
of
it.
course, of course.
I didn't finish it, but I started reading it and I love it. And I was just wondering, is there a way to buy it still, or is it something that you can't get your hands on right now, or you're re-releasing it?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the end of the run for the first edition. You can sign up on the website that you see there. There is an email sign up there where you can get notified when the second edition comes out. So I'll let everyone know. It's also helpful, when people sign up for that. I have a lot of people that have already signed up for it that missed their first run, but the more people that sign up for it, the more I'll print. I'll get even more out there to make sure everyone gets a copy. Very unlikely I'll do a third edition. I'm just planning on packing in so much. I already have 30 extra pages at this point. The book was 110 pages originally, so I already got 30 more pages. But it'll be a while before the second edition comes out because I just want to make sure I get every extra little bit in there. And there's some leads I'm chasing down, some people I'm talking to. Sometimes when you're talking to people in Japan and using translators and stuff, it takes a little while to
That's cool,
get what you need. Yeah, thank goodness for the internet, right? You can actually communicate with people in other languages very easily.
Yeah, that's
lucky for that.
Yeah, and walk us through like what are the chapters we can expect from your book? Like if you get your hands on this book, which I was lucky enough, thank you. And also you sent me such cool stuff like the wax packs and like tell me about like first before we go into that, tell me about what kind of walk us through the chapters of this book. What are we expecting to from this particular version? And then I guess tell us a little bit about your edition 2 that you're talking about. But tell us about what kind of chapters you could read through this on the Rygar stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I was saying, like this thing kind of just kept blossoming and expanding. And at first was just going to be mostly about the NES game because it was my favorite. But then I realized, I don't want to be biased here. I want to be a historian. I don't want to insert myself too much. I wanted just to cover everything I possibly can find out about this series. There's a forward by Kurt Kalata from Hardcore Gaming 101. Really nice guy. He talks about his own personal history there. I get into the timeline of all the releases, and then I just start chipping away chronologically. So you have your arcade release, then you have your home console releases, some of which are trying to appropriate the arcade original in the best way they can with the limitations they have of their hardware. Some better than others, and you have the NES and Famicom release that takes it in a pretty radically different direction, right? That's where you have your Metroidvania RPG like elements in there, the one that really resonates with a lot of us, and a few other versions that came out later. There's also a version that was released only a couple of years ago, a fan made version. So I have an interview with that developer and talked about like how his team worked on it. I also have the PS2 versions in there, and then
Yeah,
the Wii
I have
conversion as
those
well.
here, or I did have them pulled up. This is a Legendary Adventure. Is that the PS2 game? I think.
Yes, that's when Rygar went 3 dimensions. He he became much more of a Roman gladiator. I talk about in the book the influence of gladiator movies and stories at the time. This was actually right around the time of Ridley Scott's movie, right? So Gladiator was an influence here. In fact, like the producer specifically said he was influenced by that. It's not just speculation. And I actually think the look for Rygar is really great. I think it's a cool look. You got that gladiator like single sleeve armor there, protecting that his attack arm. I think it's a really cool look. It actually received quite good reviews at the time too. It looks primitive now, but it had something like an 85 percent Metascore. So pretty well received, and it made sure to incorporate a lot of classic characters, your insects, your music, your sunset, and your environments and weapons, and they added more disc armors and all that kind of stuff. It's actually sad that the Wii conversion was the end of Rygar as the series is, at
So
least today.
was the PS2 one before the Wii one? Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
so
You're right. So here's the Wii one, right? And this one's called The Battle of Argus. Is that right?
yeah,
By
yeah,
the
and
way, fun fact, I went to my retro store yesterday. I was particularly looking for both the PS2 version and the Wii version because I wanted to show you, oh, look what I found, and they didn't have either, unfortunately. But I do want to get these actually. I want to get these.
Yeah,
Um,
I spent quite a bit of money on eBay in order to have nice product photography for the book. Of course, secret agenda was to have my own personal collection, so I could have all the Rygar games. And I'm at the point now where if I can get an arcade arcade cabinet, I'll be complete. But that's probably
why
never
does
happening.
Rygar have white hair in this one? Is that right?
Yeah, so this game, Tecmo really tried to market this as something new because enough years had gone by. It's on a different system. You're using the Wii remote. They really tried to brand it as something new, which it really is not. What you have is a character that's been reskinned. He's gone much more in an anime direction. He's looking more like Cloud now and less
Yeah,
like
what the hell
from
is going
American
on?
Hero.
This isn't Final Fantasy. This is Rygar.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so not a lot of changes. You have the visual change, you have some Wii remote things, but like a lot of Wii games, it really amounted to, kind of just gyrating the Wiimote to finish a combo. They added an extra mode as well, a gladiator mode, where you're doing a little more shaking with the Wii remote, but not that impressive. So not a lot changed. And it's really sad to me that this was the final note of this series. I talk a little bit about the book too, about the potential of this series. The fact that the Rygar for PS2 came out before God of War, and to me, it's pretty clear that that game influenced God of War. God of War went in a much more gory direction, but you have this hero in this ancient Roman Greek setting, swinging around a chain-based weapon, racking up combos with surrounding enemies in a 3D environment. It's just more gory. You have all your mythological creatures, all that stuff, very similar. It's your hero's journey. That's a direction that maybe not the gore direction, but I feel like if there was a sequel to this 3D game for Rygar, they could have been the God of War, maybe. At the very least, I would love to see this character in something like Smash Brothers or something. Like, throw this guy a bone, like he's got a great weapon. He would be incredible in that game.
Yeah, it's like throw this. I feel like they haven't done this series justice for being such a classical, like especially an NES classic, because it's probably one of those NES games that everyone has in their NES collection. Like it's and dude, I was gonna say why don't they God of War this, but you're saying that obviously this was before God of War, and this to me looks
Yeah.
like God of War, like.
Yeah, yeah, and it's sadly, when we look back on games, we tend to remember those that still stand out today. So we don't look at Rygar and say, "Oh, that influenced God of War." Instead, we're like, "Oh, that looks like a God of War game," right? We define it against God of War instead of vice versa. And similarly, it's true with Metroidvanias because the NES game, you had to traverse landscapes, backtrack, find items and upgrades in order to progress farther in a network of paths, right? Like it's that what we know now as a Metroidvania. But what's interesting is Rygar actually came out before Metroid. It predates Metroid by about three
So
months
the
in
the
Japan.
NES version came out right before Metroid. Huh.
Yeah. So the Famicom version for Rygar came out first. That's not to say that Metroid was influenced. If you think about the development cycles they had at the time, I think there's a lot of parallel thought that's coming out. But what it means is that Rygar was not influenced by Metroid. And you think about how, like, Castlevania 2 is really where they mostly started introducing their Metroidvania like elements, also came out after. This is something that it is a pioneer in that space that people still love today. People still love Metroidvanias. I still
and
play every
and
one I can get my hands on.
I guess that's a great word, and we should probably define that. Brian, what is a Metroidvania in your eyes? How do you is and I we always hear this word, but I don't think we ever talk about it. What does it mean to be a
Yeah, and that's
Metroidvania?
one of those things where it's kind of contentious. I made sure to touch on the book to caveat that it really depends on your own personal definition. It's called Metroidvania because Metroid and Castlevania tend to define it quite well. You can see, like, on your screen there, you see some modern ones. But generally speaking, and this is just my opinion, don't eat me up online for saying this. Like, it tends to be an adventure where you are collecting certain items or some type of tool that allows you to unlock spaces that you have previously visited. Like, there's this network effect where you have to backtrack in order to progress further in the game. And so it's not your classic linear adventure. You're really zigzagging around. You have to use your smarts to say, I got this new thing. Like in Rygar for NES, I got this crossbow. Okay, I'm going to shoot this crossbow across these poles, these pylons. Now I'm going to attach to it with my wind pulley, and I can go across. And through trial and error, you'll find, try to jump that across that ravine, and I couldn't get across it. If you look at like Metroid, like a lot of us remember, you see examples in that, like dropping into the ball. I can't go underneath this little tunnel unless I'm small enough. I can't open this door unless I have these missiles, like all those types of things that unlock more places. That's why I would love to see a modern Rygar game that went 2D. If it was Metroid Dread, but Rygar Dread, and you had all these disc armors, and just thinking about all that potential, that would be amazing. But yeah, everyone has a different definition. Some people maybe are a little more hardcore. They're like, it has to be 2D. It's like, well, does it? Um, I don't think it does, but everyone has their own definition. That's fine.
But if you do see Castlevania, and then because I was just showing Metroid and Castlevania, that Rygar still does look like that. It has the Metrovania before the Metrovania. So why don't we call it Rygarvania, or
Yeah,
why don't we call it,
yeah,
you know, like I think that it's a game that's really been not given enough credit. We all remember it. Like from my experience, like I remember Rygar. I remember playing it, but when you go down, like, Castlevania has lived a fruitful life, right, past its 80s days, and so has uh, Metroid. You know, Castlevania's got a freaking animated show on Netflix, and you know that's doing really good for its culture. And what does Tecmo is Tecmo still around, Brian? And do they own the rights to Rygar still, or is someone else own
Yeah,
it? Or
yeah. So Tecmo has restructured many times, as a lot of these companies do. They're Kwai Tecmo now. So there's been different mergers and changes in names over the year, but yeah, they're still out there kicking. They're still making games. They're just not making Rygar games.
yeah, I wonder why they haven't thought about it and bringing back such a great game. And by the way, the new Metroid is a 2D platformer. Did you see the new Metroid?
Oh
Metroid
yeah,
Dread. Um,
it's already on my backlog list. I can't wait to play it. I think it's October or somewhere around there, so I will definitely be picking that up on launch
and
day.
you know, I thought it was really great of Nintendo to go back to the roots of it. And well, that's not Dread. It's
Oh no, that's the intro.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
the
intro.
intro.
Yes, it is Dread.
Yeah.
I'm looking for it. Like, obviously, this looks very similar to a modern version of a side-scrolling Metroidvania. Like this is it, and it looks beautiful. I am so excited
Oh,
for this.
it's gorgeous. I can't wait.
And everyone's like, "Oh, but what about Metroid Prime?" I think that people are actually really excited that it's a 2D platformer. The way you know Metroid has always been, although I love Metroid Prime and stuff like that, but I really am like stoked for this. And
Yeah.
why can't we get a Rygar like this? Like, why can't I see? It's really a shame.
Yeah, I feel like if they just there's what 80 plus characters in Smash Brothers, maybe if they start there, throw them into that so that people can you don't have to commit to a full game, get people reacclimated with the character. Be like, hell, Breath of the Wild, where there's this hero named Link who's resurrected from his slumber and then he saves the world. Well, that was Rygar also. He did that a long time ago. He has a really cool weapon. I feel like they could start there and then, maybe there'd be some demand, but it's hard. It's like Metroid is so sticky. It's really hard to, that's what people gravitate towards. Yeah, maybe it's a hard sell these days, but I would love to see it.
Biff said, "Oh, that game is obviously a Rygoid genre or whatever." um, right here, we're seeing a couple of versions that I'm not sure which one this is. This might be what
Yeah,
Commodore,
that's Commodore. Yeah,
where it didn't have much of a background or artwork in the background.
there's actually some that even look worse. But yeah, that's the one I believe that had the enemies that ran really fast, which quite challenging. But you can see how they're really trying to go for the arcade look. It wasn't until the Famicom NES version where they tried to do something different. And actually, something I haven't mentioned yet, there's also the Sega version, which came out a few years after these ports, and they tried to do something a little different. In the Sega one, you
Is
have
it the Master System one? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and yeah, there's the intro with a sword that makes no sense because he doesn't have a sword. But yeah, you can see he's in the tunnels there. Like there's a few pathways you can take. It's not branching in the sense where you can like free explore, but occasionally you can go above ground or below ground. It's only like 5 levels, so you see like two bosses that get repeated, and then you have a final boss. To me, the most disappointing thing is that they had a few years to pump this out between the NES version and this. They could have went into that direction, but they chose to stick with the arcade, and that's fine. But there was definitely more potential here as well.
The NES version was very different, right?
I mean, yeah, it's radical. I mean, you could see here, it's like this is literally like the arcade versions and these other ports is just you're going left to right, you're hitting things. If they touch you, you're dead. NES is, we talked about the Metroidvania part, but we didn't talk about like the RPG parts. There is you gain experience when you kill enemies. You gain something called tone and last, which really just means offensive defense. I'm stronger and I'm more defensive. You also gain essentially like currency for magic. So you have 3 spells that you can choose from. So when you pause the game, you can select those things. So like just blast the whole screen or power yourself up, the kind of stuff that you try to save up for bosses. And then you have like your potions. There's no like shops or towns or anything like that, but you are acquiring potions from like enemy drops on rare occasions, and there's like some of these hermit characters that give you hints and tips, but they also there's the few that will recharge your health as well. So you do see this, you do see some of these RPG elements that I think make it special. You don't have different disc armors or anything like that. That's all later. But some of the going back to like different sections of the book, like later in the book, I did some interviews with some indie developers that are doing some ROM hacks of the NES version and some other versions, and they take it to a level that would have been cool to have seen in an NES sequel or even today, which is let's have more spells, let's have more disc armors, let's have more pathways, more branching of those pathways. Let's expand the universe. One guy even like zoomed the camera out. He pulled it back so the world just felt like bigger, which I thought was an interesting choice, something I never would have thought of. So yeah, it's got some interviews with those people as well, in the fan section where all the fan art is and all the other fan creations. And there's even some people that made some action figures for Rygar. You've probably seen like, some people like to take old action figures and put some putty on them and reshape them. Like they'll take like a Hulk, if they want to make a bigger guy. And yeah, you can see some of them here. These are in the book.
Whoa.
It was really fun. It was so cool, like talking with these people too. I made sure to get permission from every artist. I would never just throw like some fan art's work in here without their permission, giving them credit, linking them back to their work in the credit. And it was cool talking to these guys and just kind of learning a little more about like how they did this. Yeah, this guy's really impressive. I believe he used a Hulk to make the big hermit dude,
the big guy,
or the Endora god, I think it is.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah, people are incredible. People are so creative.
So what is the culture like for Rygar? Are there like groups that are just specifically like you, Brian, that like are obsessed with this game? I would imagine that are there any like places you can go on the internet, the Rygar, support group? Like what kind of like culture does it have today? Besides your wonderful book and stuff like that.
When you said support group, I imagine everyone sitting in some like fold out chairs in an old gymnasium, like talking about their PTSD with Rygar or something. But I mean, it's just all your typical forums. There's some like old forums that have kind of died out and shut down. More traditional forums. But a lot of people I talk to, it's just like across platforms like Twitter and Instagram and DeviantArt and like other. There's a lot of like Japanese sites that are kind of like DeviantArt. Where people like share like their pixel art and their fan art and stuff. So that kind of stuff. And as far as like culture goes in general, it's interesting because like some of the people I reached out to in Japan, I was like, this is like kind of a almost forgotten series in a way, or underappreciated. And a lot of them were like, no, we have not forgotten. Like we know Argus. Like they call it Argus because it's Argus no Senshi in Japan, so, which is the warrior of Argus. And they're like, no, we know Argus. We still play Argus in the arcade. And like people would send me pictures of like the arcade machine, the sit down arcade machine. And, they said there's still like a passion for the arcade game and the Famicom game there in particular, which is really cool. And like I've come to learn there's still a passion for it in America too. Every now and then I'll just check those hashtags and like, I'm kind of surprised that people talk about it still as often as they do. Of course, it's not, again, Zelda and those kind of games people are talking about more, but people still talk about it, even though it is such an old game. Yeah.
Why don't you make a Rygar game? Why don't you quit what you're doing now and make a Rygar game?
I know. Maybe I'll boot up the Valve's Hammer editor and make my new 3D version. I can make this is Lapis that they're showing there. I can make the floating sky castle or something like that. That might be fun.
This is actually like, let's see. Can I get back to that? What's the name of this guy?
So this is most people just refer to them as hermits. The ones that have the third eye on their forehead, like a slightly different sprite, those are the Endora gods. And those are the ones that are in the story. They're captured. They have an artifact that they want to give the hero in order to help defeat the evil tyranny. So they're similar.
This particular like cutscene or whatever part of this game is very iconic from my experience from Rygar. I just remember this scene. Like seeing this just brings back memories, you know. It's really and look, you're right. The NES version was so creative. Like, wow, they really were like, let's not copy just the arcade version. Let's make this cool. Like, let's make this work. And man, it's just so many memories. I really want to see it come to life again in some form or fashion. Even if it's like what they did with the new Metroid, make another side-scrolling Rygar that's updated and cool.
Yeah,
I feel
that
like
would be perfect.
you need like a big publisher to get behind it. Like Nintendo needs to get behind it, and like you said. Now, if it was released on Smash, what would the reaction be? You think if they did new? What do they do with Nintendo? They said new incoming person or whatever they do, to make it seem cool. Would people? I think it would be half people knowing who Rygar character is and people not knowing who that is. Do you think it would
Yeah,
perceived well or not? I don't know. I'm curious.
I wonder. I suspect they would have to bundle it with a few other better known characters so that people aren't completely shocked. But at the same time, I think about like Marth is a character, right? Like I haven't played Smash in a long time, but I remember Marth, right? The blue hair guy, I think with the sword, right? There's 1,000 guys with swords in that game now, but Marth is a character from a Japanese. It's not even an RPG; it's like a tactical RPG, kind of like old school Shining Force, but for the Famicom. And I had no idea who this guy was until about a year ago when I finally played the game that he was from, and I realized, oh, he's from this game. It's not even that good of a game, and you can barely recognize him because he was, 8-bit at the time. But maybe the Japanese audience remembered him more. Maybe that's what gave him, like some power there. But like my friends when we played Smash back in college, a lot of them loved that character. They didn't care about who he was. They didn't need to know who he was. So I feel like if you get the character design right, you don't need like Simon Belmont to come out with a whip in order to be like, look, that's a Belmont. That's so important. Like if you could do the disc armors. You could have so many cool attacks with that. I mean, you could it almost designs itself. I feel like. Oh, is that Mark there?
Yeah, I think so.
um, yeah, and so I feel like he would be such an interesting character that people would gravitate to him based on the gameplay, if nothing else.
Well, they just had the guy from Punch Out's in it now, right? Like,
Yeah, but they're iconic though. I guess everyone knows Punch Out.
yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, there's probably someone like when they pitch the new characters to Smash, someone's been trying to get Rygar in there, and they're like they keep just shooting him down.
I
I
I wonder, like, is he a post-it note on a wall somewhere that like the sticky keeps falling off the wall, and every now and then someone tries to, they put some tape on it and put it back up in the corner. But yeah, I think if Rygar was a Nintendo property, maybe we would have seen more here. If he was a Nintendo owned property, but
he deserves more love.
yeah,
He
yeah, poor guy.
And I will say this just to quickly mention the Lynx version of this game is excellent. I think this is the Lynx version. And if anyone knows what Lynx
Yes.
is, it's the Atari portable system. And honestly, one of the best games on the Lynx was Rygar. It was
Yeah,
fantastic.
in fact, in the second edition, I found all this old marketing material. Some of the foreign releases had Rygar on the box. So when you bought the console, he was right there, front and center. There were ads where he was front and center. He was on the screen and the giant links and the full page ad. It was definitely like popular, and they were using it as to help propel the system. And yeah, I mean, it looks great. It feels great. My beef with it maybe is that like because it's kind of claustrophobic, it's like so close because it's the limitation of the links itself. You don't really see things coming, but it doesn't really hurt the gameplay. I feel like it actually is okay.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, a lot of people told me this is their favorite.
It's really fun. I mean, it's a pretty game too. Look at the back, the detail in the backgrounds they did on this game. Like they actually made it look really beautiful. Um,
Yeah, it does look good.
it looks good, but yeah, it's more in line with the arcade, right? For sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very much the arcade.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I forgot all about this. That's something I've been looking to collect again is Lynx, man. That's like a forgotten system and console or handheld, I guess I should say. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
wow, man. Well, I want to hear a little bit about. So, tell us a little bit about what you want to do next steps for another book. What can we expect from you in the future? As we're closing out here, give us a little tease on what you're doing next with all this.
Yeah. So first, you mentioned those wax packs and the stickers and stuff. That was mostly just some fun stuff I want to
Yeah,
do on the side. When people buy the book, they get I made four at first, but I ended up making five, like trading cards just for fun.
these are
So you
awesome.
get you get one card with the book and a sticker of the cover. But I made these wax packs, so I'm like, I have these cards, and I just thought it'd be fun. It's that feeling of nostalgia when you can like rip into the wax pack and open up. I
Dude.
didn't put any bubble gum because I feel like that's a little weird to package unwrapped gum and sell it to people. It felt a little strange, but the main focus is the book because I'm trying to be a historian here. I'm not trying to step on Kawhi Tekno's toes here, and I want to focus really on being a historian. But in the next book, some things I'm already working on is I mentioned more fan art, tons more like images, reviews, ads from the time, more box art, like some magazine spread type stuff, and just more details on some of the games as well, some of the ports. I have some interviews I'm doing with some of the world record holders. So I had a speedrun record holder, a little blurb in the first one, but this is someone who uses some cheats in the NES, or I guess you'd call them glitches, really, because there's a couple places in the game where you can get bumped by an enemy, and basically it takes you somewhere farther in the game, so you don't have to collect all the items. But for the next edition, I want to talk to. There's a record holder for NES without cheats. There's a world record holder in France for the arcade game for most points.
Oh,
For
that's
like your
cool.
arcade proper, like actual stand up arcade machine. But then there's also a record holder for like the main version. These are like verified records, so I'm going to talk to them. I also have other little like fun things. Like there was a Tecmo vinyl album that I wanted to spotlight in there from '86. Someone was nice enough to send me some nice photos of that. And other things too. Like I put some funny. I made some fun like puzzles and word games in there just to kind of like tie a bow on the end of the book to make it kind of cute and fun. And I have some other promotional materials that I found for the PS2 release that are really weird and obscure, but I figure if I'm going to do this second edition justice, and if this is the end of it, I should just pack in everything I could find. Also, there's an artist who's EST. He wanted to make a new piece of art for Rygar. He had a piece in the first one, but he wanted to create something new. So he showed me a mock-up of it's inspired by the NES version, and it has all the different settings and characters all packed into this really epic collage. And I'm thinking about actually putting that on a poster. So kind of like, the old school fold out posters you get with that glossy print that you
Yeah.
put up on your walls. So I'm thinking about doing that too.
I love it, dude. I love how you're not just doing book. You're like figuring out like clever ways to make you feel the nostalgia of this thing. I mean, wax packs and stuff. Dude, thank you so much for sending me all that. That was really
Oh,
cool.
for sure. For sure.
And if you click my TikTok, everyone, I did a video featuring all the stuff Brian sent me, and there's a couple of photos too on Twitter of stuff, and I think on my Instagram as well. And Brian, you're on Twitter at Brian Riggsbee, right? The website is rygarbook.com. Is that right? Am I getting
That's
these
right.
right? Then you have a personal blog called dangerforce.com. And then what's your Instagram? I know you have an Instagram too.
Yeah. Yeah. I made an Instagram just for the book. It's Rygar Book also. Just trying to
Rygar
keep it
book.
simple so people can remember. The title of the book is a mouthful, so I figure I'll
Yeah.
save people some time.
Well, dude, I this has been one of my very favorite episodes because I like taking a particular game from our past and really focusing on it, and you're the perfect person to represent Rygar. And whenever I think of Rygar, it will be Brian Rigsby will be a part of that about that. And I will always be
Thanks.
looking to you to know any new news about Rygar. Please DM me if you ever hear that they're actually developing a new game. I would love to have you on. I would love to have you on here again to talk about when you do have the podcast coming. I'm not the podcast or the next book. I would love to have you part of that. Wow, we had someone spam me. That's a new first. Welcome. Become famous. Buy followers. That means I've made it on Twitch if I got someone spamming me. All right. But no, dude,
Yeah.
Brian, thanks for getting up early on a Saturday morning and joining me in the cafe, by the way.
Oh,
Because,
don't worry. The baby had me up. I'm up.
oh, that's
And
awesome.
a couple quick things I just want to say is
Sure.
Matt Waggle is the cover artist. He is one of my absolute favorite artists. Check him out, like Google Matt Waggle. He's worked in the gaming industry as well, and he's really cool. He's more of a 3D artist actually. And Justin Severson he's the copy editor. He's another friend of mine, but this words is his expertise, and without him, this thing would not have been nearly as good. And I'm so thankful that I know these people and can share in their expertise. And the last thing is, I'm going to move on to something else. I'm going to do something else retro gaming related at some point. So if anyone is like, I wish there was X on Y, tell me what you long for, and maybe I'll work on it.
Oh, dude, I have so many games that I've like forgotten that I really want to like learn more about and stuff like that. By the way, so I'm looking through the retro category, and some Japanese streamer is playing Rygar right now. We're gonna raid him, although
Nice.
I can't understand the channel's name. But I think we can raid this person, but it's weird. Their channel is in. Oh wait, here I got it. It's called Insert Coin 50 and is the name, and they're playing Rygar right now. So we are definitely raiding this one. Whoever this person is, we're gonna raid them. 1 second. And Brian, thanks again so much for coming on the show, man. It was so great to have you. We're actually gonna raid someone playing it. So No Fear wants to tell you that I'm so glad I didn't miss this one. I spent far too much of my childhood getting butt beat by this game. So really great, really and awesome. I want to say thanks everyone in the VOD world. Obviously, not everyone is here live, so thank you so much for watching the recorded episode. We're going to be throwing this around the rest of the week. We're also going to be replaying it as well. Brian, thank you so much, man. Awesome to meet you, and I'm also happy to have met you, because it's not just about having you on the show. I love building long-lasting relationships, and I think we have a lot in common. So really great to meet you, man. Everyone, keep your eyes out for anything Brian's doing Rygar related. Think of any games that you might want Brian to think about putting a really detailed look like he did with Rygar. I think that you have done wonders for this culture and this game, Brian. Thank you so much for putting in the effort to bring back a lot of the history of these important games, a part of our childhood that don't get enough notice. So really appreciate it. Let's go raid Insert Coin 50, who is playing Rygar right now. And I don't think they speak English, but you know what? Just give them love, because they're playing a game that's universal. Don't have to speak the language to play Rygar, right? Right, Brian?
Absolutely not.
But anyway, thank you so much. Happy 4th of July weekend to all the Americans out there. Enjoy it. Have a lot of food, hot dogs, hamburgers, vegan burgers, okay? I'm in tune with everything. Whatever it might be, enjoy it, be safe, and have a great weekend. We'll see everyone next Saturday. And this was Cafe BTW. Take care. Okay, we're going to raid them. Great. They are playing Rygar, Brian.
Nice.
So let me stop streaming.